The copium of opposition hinges on the free from being chain of domestic Reconian chokehold. But we have successfully responded to this by saying that freedom is in vain, simply put, in a larger cage, to which you have no key and you have harder means of breaking bad. First major issue then, on the crisis of stagnation. The dismissive means of strategy launched by opposition here depends on the assumption that every state in the world, like China, has utilized the free market retroactively to be the means of their subsistence and allow them to unlock the benefit of their domestic power. First, it's untrue. China is a bad example for ops case, especially when their development has massively started through state regulation of their capitalistic structure, like how they control the health, manufacturing, and other vital industry to their own means. The massive difference between the comparative in this debate is whether is it better for the state when they hinge on being protectionist or on doing capitalist structure rather than banking on the illusion of laissez-faire due to the multitude of harms that we have mentioned which gained no response from them. It's still an ongoing failure and makes the future foreseeably far worse inside opposition, which again, to their avail, still gained no response from them. Our response to this is to simply question the distribution of wealth and other resources in macro scale. They claim that it allowed states to innovate, but the response to this is that a lot of the benefits of trade through import and export still happens even if you are protectionist in nature. The state controlled these hegemonies instead in our side rather than the invisible actors or private actors like Rothschild, Walton, and other actors which are not even accessible to the knowledge of an average Joe. So it's far harder for you to call for regulation and accountability when there's a monopoly that's still existing, when the fact that Microsoft is buying a lot of their competition allows US to get the larger benefit of neoliberalism and allows other country to have harder foot in competition. So this just proves the opposition's net impact is non-exclusive and remains marginal within the debate because the comparative advantage that they are bolstering can be flipped and is actually better in our side. Here's the way up. First, in terms of gross accountability, trade and international relations still happens in the thesis of Gulf. But the difference is we can actually call out your own state because they're the direct main actor that shapes your economy. This happens differently at up. It does not matter whether Lenny or Sarah wins in the next Philippine election because the pre-existing structure of free market is still the size for the means of sustenance of small country like Philippines. Second question on the disparity of distribution in macro. This is what we're trying to prove based on the speech of Joseph and based on the speech of Argat. That on large scale, you are placed in harsher means of disparity of wealth and distribution and control. In up, your manufacturing, industry, and service-led sectors will be placed in the control of Bretton Woods, IMF, and any invasive natures within the market, like BlackRock, for instance, because you don't have any democratic access on how you will call them out and regulate their own sphere. That's why we have repeated again and again that you need to rely on this pre-existing structure that are monopolized already by large industry, by large countries in the first place, which we think is unfair and which we think gives no ability for third world country to stimulate their own growth. Again, capitalism exists in both sides, but literally burden third world countries in your world. In fact, retroactively, this is much worse because neoliberalism allows the upside of countries who have won the two world wars and left the countries like Philippines to rely on the current global upscale that's happening to which they cannot control. Second question then, view the way up in risk and the benefits in micro. But before that, I'll take a POI. 3, 1. Engagement local. So, second question, where can we view the way up in risk and benefits in micro? The means of capitalism, and if we bite the bullet of higher efficient competition in their side, even if we say that this is true, even if we say that, maybe it is actually garnering right now within the status quo, it is still invasive and it strengthens the monopolies that already exist. So the fact that Apple can release a cheap, high-efficient iPhone, and that means that people in third world country need to co-op on the means of US because your domestic industry cannot provide the same designation that Apple has. So the competition of the product and the way that innovation happens, it happens through the large scale of unfair distribution because the metric of stagnation happens far worse when you don't have the stimulus for you to provide your own industry. And their claim on this is that, you know what, you need to rely on iPhone because, you cannot really do this in your own resources available. That's untrue because there's a lot of factories, even in Vietnam, who formulates iPhone because they can. The only difference is how we monopolize innovation, which again, you don't have any incentive to do if you are placed in stagnation and pre-existing structure that allows you to just focus on sustenance and all of the subsistence that you need to do in order for you to thrive. That's why innovation and the growth of it will always be controlled by large infrastructure and large monopolistic structure that you have inside of. So this strengthens the birth lottery case here, because you cannot control whether you're born from US or whether you're born from the Philippines. What you can control is how you can uplift and you can call out your own state and you can provide sustenance for them, to which wouldn't happen if all of it is directly being controlled by other large networks which are being co-opted by your own state. Like the fact that Philippines need to do a lot of imports, even though need to do a lot of imports within the rice industry because they need to borrow technology from US, for instance, etc., because they think that they cannot compete within the market. They think that they cannot export rice efficiently due to the fact that it has been overloaded even by US. So even if you do have the resources to upscale your own economy, it's harder for you to achieve that, especially when the competition is already skewed to benefit the unfair distributed actors that we have mentioned. So the question in this debate is, if it's really successful, why does it allow for a lot of bubble from US to massively take out a lot of economic structures from third world countries to happen? Like the fact that it only takes one financial crisis from the US to trickle down to a lot of third world countries also, even though they're not from US, because majority of the stakes and all of the shareholders that we have is dependent on these top world countries. This is why China's being protectionist right now. They want to protect their own state. They created their own stimulus for manufacturing, even if it comes to the expense of being, harder, being longer, and etc. But that incentive and that capability cannot happen in third world countries right now, simply because US outcompetes them in any other sectors, even in the sectors that they want. That is the means of middle ground that is failing right now. And we claim that if being free comes with an expense of being locked to a larger form of tyranny, which you have no escape, then the systematic failure is enormously failing on its purpose, initiation, and repercussion.